Hello there, welcome to the Jaggy Thistle podcast. It's me, Kenny Farquharson, with you for the next wee while to discuss Scottish politics and Scottish culture. That's what we do on the Jaggy Thistle, both on these podcasts and on the website. If you're new to this endeavour, please check us out. The links are all in the show notes. We have a newsletter on Substack. We have documentary photography, we have essays, we have criticism, we have political analysis, all looking at the world through Scottish eyes. So if that sounds like something you might be interested in, give us a shot. You'd be very welcome. Today I'm going to talk about Peter Mandelson, Lord Mandelson, God bless him. I thought it was a good excuse to first of all to tell a wee story that I don't particularly come out of very well. And it's funny, all my best stories seem to be ones that I don't come out very well from. And I wonder why that's the case. Anyway, I'm going to tell you about my embarrassing breakfast with Peter Mandelson. So we're talking about, this must have been late 90s, early 2000s. Forgive me if I'm a little bit vague. It's when I was a political editor, Scottish political editor of the Sunday Times, which was a great job. Before the days when political journalists had to work for both dailies and Sundays. So it gave a little bit of time for meeting people and for thinking deep thoughts and having large lunches, etc. So I'd heard that Peter Mandelson was going to be in Edinburgh. So I got in touch and said, "Can we meet up?" And he said, "Look, I'm busy, but why don't you meet me for breakfast?" And he was staying in the Caledonian Hotel at the West End of Princes Street, which is where all the New Labour bigwigs like to stay, citing security, but also the fact that it was a marvellous 5-star hotel didn't divert them into another premises. So I turned up early at the Caledonian, and sat at the breakfast table and looked at the menu and thought, bloody hell, I'm having that. I'm having the big full Scottish gut buster with tatty scones, haggis, the full works, a carafe of coffee, large glass of orange juice, the full Scottish humdinger of a breakfast, and waited for the arrival of the Prince of Darkness, and eventually comes down and joins me and calls the waiter over, and Peter says, "I'd like a cup of warm water and a slice of lemon on the side. Not boiling hot water, just warm water, slice of lemon on the side." So as we're chatting, and I'm tucking into this huge breakfast, he occasionally takes a sip of his china cup and of his lemon-scented water. I think he just got by on the feasting on the bodies of his opponents, feasting on the carcasses of his opponents. That's probably sustained him during the day. Anyway, that's my breakfast with Mandelson. But it was actually one coda to that story. And towards the end, he said, "Look, I've got a story for you." I thought, "Oh, that's great," because we've been talking about generalities and exchanging gossip, etc. He said, "I've got a story for you." I said, "That what is it?" And he told me what the story. I can't now recall what it was. He said, "So will that make the front page of the Sunday Times Scottish edition tomorrow?" This was a Saturday. I should have mentioned this was a Saturday morning. "Will that make the splash in your paper tomorrow?" And I said, "Well, no, not really." And he said, "Why not?" And I explained why it wasn't as good a story as he thought it was, given the context in Scotland. I said, "Okay, what if I said X, Y, Z?" And this, of course, was, will that make the splash? And I went, yeah, that will definitely make the splash. And I thought it was interesting, his ability not just to give a line and say, this is what I want to tell you, but to assess the newsworthiness of that line and what kind of projection it was likely to get, and then to adjust what he was wanting to say in the light of feedback from a journalist. And I thought that was very few politicians do that. A couple, which I don't think I should name them actually. They're currently still active in Scottish politics. One on the nationalist side, one on the unionist side, who I've known to do this and have that kind of awareness of media placement. But that's a sign of a good politician who's aware of not only the need to get their message across, but to project it in the most effective way possible. Anyway, that's my story. So back up to date. All this fuss about Mandelson resigning, being sacked as a UK ambassador to the United States, which is a marvelous job, by the way. You know, I've been in that ambassador's residence in Washington DC on Embassy Row, and it's a marvelous. Lucian's designed the UK embassies in New Delhi and in Washington DC at the same time, and they're both marvelous buildings. And so it was a real plum posting, and Mandelson will be absolutely gutted and furious to have been sacked from this job. But the whole furore around that, it cast my mind back to a piece that Mandelson wrote, a column that he wrote in the Sunday Times, was published on the 1st of January 2023. And basically it was framed as a respectful contribution to the debate about the Labour manifesto for the upcoming general election. But in reality it was a hit job. Okay, it was where Mandy laid waste to a number of policies that didn't meet with his approval. And one of those was the discussion about whether or not Labour should scrap the House of Lords and replace it with a new entity. And Mandy, machine gunned this idea from above in this column. And I must have, I rolled my eyes as I was reading it, because what possible motive could Lord Mandelson have for trying to preserve the House of Lords? What possible reason could there be that he wanted to preserve his and his colleagues' lifetime sinecure as legislators for life in this bastion of elite privilege? What possible reason could there be that for him wanting to protect his ability to wander the corridors of power on a daily basis, and with the opportunities that presented to, whisper his wisdom in the ears of selected recipients whenever he fancied. So as I say, I rolled my eyes at this, and as was often the case, the real target for this broadside in the Sunday Times was Gordon Brown. Now, I know I've read all the books about the TBGB's New Labour psychodrama, and it's a fascinating story. And that I'm conscious of the fact that that Gordon Brown eventually reached out to Mandelson and brought him back in, but it's a relationship where there's a deep tension there. And sometimes Mandelson just can't help himself, and this is one of those occasions, because the issue about the House of Lords was wrapped up with one of Brown's big projects of his time post being Prime Minister. I think it was. Oh, let me just check. When was it? It was. Yeah, it was in 2020 when the Keir Starmer asked Gordon Brown to lead a commission into rewiring the British state, okay, for ending the kind of institutional sclerosis of this country with its vast, weight of history and precedent and the way things are done in Whitehall and the way power is exercised and the way money is used in government. He basically said to Brown, look at this and give me some ideas. And Brown, 2.5 years later, came out, he published a document, which I think is one of the most underrated documents in contemporary political history. It's a report, 150 odd pages, and it's called A New Britain. It's a long report. I think Brown saw it as an opportunity to bring in lots of other aspects of his thinking about contemporary Britain. When he eventually went to the Labour NEC, one of their comments was that it was too long. And so they sent it back and said, can you make it shorter? And the version that came back to them was 12 pages longer. This is the most peak Brown, peak Gordon moment there. But this was a report that Mandelson went to war against, okay, because an unreformed Britain suited him and his cronies fine, frankly. He didn't want his power base dismantled by his own party. And Mandelson was largely successful in steering the party away from Gordon Brown's blueprint for a radical blueprint for a rewired Britain, okay, for a rewired British state that decentralised power, that rethought about accountability and conduct in public life, and recast the institutions of state so that they served the people rather than got in the way of action, the kind of action that a Labour government wanted to take, the kind of redistribution of power and wealth that was always should be at the heart of every Labour government. So this was a serious piece of work, seriously damaged, seriously undermined, largely because of the hooks that Mandelson still had within the Labour Party. And it's only since his resignation that I think that some of these have become more widely known to the general public. I mean, people within the political world like myself kind of aware of them. And I was warned at the time of Brown's report that Mandy's operatives were hard at work trying to undermine this. But it's the kind of the influence that Mandelson had, inviting senior Labour figures from new generations to his for dinner in his house in Regent's Park, and his mentorship of Morgan McSweeney, now Chief of Staff to Starmer, and the way he persuaded McSweeney, perhaps didn't take too much persuading, that the enemy wasn't just the left, the Corbynite left, it was also the soft left. It wasn't just the hard left, it was also the soft left, and that they should be resisted in government. So, Mandelson's influence on today's Labour Party and the last Labour manifesto was extensive and profound. And as I say, when it came to A New Britain, the Brown Report on rewiring the UK, a radical rewiring of the UK, it was fairly successful. And my point today, my main points today is that Mandelson's demise in the last few days, it's a huge problem for Labour. It's a huge problem for Starmer. It needs sorted, and it has put the Prime Minister in a degree of peril that would have been unthinkable a year ago with the vast landslide that he had. But Starmer is in trouble at the moment. But Mandelson's demise is an opportunity to walk back some of his influence within the Labour Party and within the Labour government. Because I think there's a question mark over his motives for much of what he was doing. And the opportunity now exists, in the light of what we now know about Mandelson, to rethink and reappraise some of the things, some of the influence that he had on today's Labour government. And there's another good reason for doing that. I think that's a good reason. There's reason enough to do that in itself, but there's a very profound political reason for doing it now, and that is that what Gordon Brown offered in A New Britain is exactly what this Labour government needs at this moment. Okay, because you have a Labour government where the criticism is that there's no narrative, there's no boldness, there's no radicalism, there's no sense of story in what this Labour government is for. And what the Brown agenda in this report offers is a vast transfer of power from the centre, from the dusty corridors of Whitehall and St James's, to the regions, to the nations, to communities, talking about a huge amount of devolution of power and of money and of accountability from the centre to where people actually live, so that government does not feel as distant and people feel more in control of their own destinies where they are. And that aspect actually of the Brown report did survive the Mandelson operation. And that has been one of the most, I think, interesting and positive things that Labour has done in the past year under Angela Rayner, sadly no longer in government. And it's in a sense, it's kind of carrying on the promise of levelling up that was made by Boris Johnson, but never delivered. So Labour is delivering on a key promise of the take back control Brexit type era of the disillusioned, left behind, wanting their day in the sun. And Labour, I think, recognised the veracity of that argument, recognised it too damn late, in my view, and are now answering that call. So that's a big part of what we're talking about. But there's more to the Brown report than this. There was also a whole bit about bringing integrity and ethics back into public life, with lots of scrutiny and abilities to citizens' juries to kind of test whether or not politicians have broken new laws on integrity and ethics, anti-corruption officials and agencies being set up to kind of counter the cynical view that all politicians are at it, which is really pervasive in the country as a whole. The amount of the breakdown of trust in our political class is profound. So there was this kind of moral sense, the moral purpose to Brown's report. And then, in the element that's perhaps most directly relevant to Scotland, because much of the devolution stuff we already have, most of the devolution agenda in the Brown report was for England. The element that was most applicable or relevant to the Scottish voter was the scrapping of the House of Lords as it currently exists and its replacement with what was called a Senate of the nations and regions. Okay, many countries have senates. Earlier this year, I went to Athens and wandered the streets of the ancient Greek town square where democracy was invented and where the Senate held sway. Many countries in the world have senates as their upper house. I see no reason why that shouldn't work in a British way here. And the point of that would be the second, that is upper house under the Brown Plan, the Senate of the Nations and Regions, would have new powers and would be cemented into the British Constitution in a way that is currently still not the case when it comes to just the parliaments that exist around these islands. So, and it would provide, the second house would provide a kind of a balance to a House of Commons that can still be dominated by a party with 30% of the vote. And you know, depending on how the arithmetic falls, you know, politics can still be dominated by parties on a quite a small minority of the vote in this country, and short of proportional representation, which I think we're still a little bit away from. I still don't think the circumstances are there to bring in PR for Westminster elections. In the absence of that, you can use a second house, upper house, as a check and balance on the House of Commons to ensure that never again can as in the Brexit era, can a minority government bring about huge constitutional change with just a minority of the vote. So you know that's it would recast British politics so that Scotland, Wales, and the north, the kind of the northwest, the northeast, that together they could act as a balance against the south and the southeast, and there'd be the balance of power within this country would be far more equitable. At the same time, with all the devolution that we've talked about, the devolution from 25 years ago to Scotland, Northern Ireland, to Wales, to London, that was phase one of devolution. Then phase two, this happening now, this spread out of power of metro mayors and city regions, with money and powers coming, powers over skills and education and technical education and job centres and local economic development, all local responsibility with money going to English regions. To be honest, something that hasn't really happened in Scotland and should be happening in Scotland as well. We still think in Scotland we still have a very national view of this, rather than Edinburgh City region or Aberdeen City region, Glasgow City region, with their own local quirks and problems, and that should be looked at by local politicians and local people, and rather than being decided in Edinburgh and Holyrood. So I think we're getting a situation where Scotland's going to be a far more centralised society than England is, which is I don't think it's an entirely welcome development. I think that we have some way to go there to recognise the value of devolution within Scotland. A little bit. I think we might return to that subject at some stage. I think that's a good subject to talk about in the Jaggy Thistle. So there we have an opportunity, I think, now to take this Gordon Brown project out of the long grass and bring it to the forefront of British politics. because the replacement of the House of Lords is one of the most popular policies in British politics. If you ask people, YouGov asked this late last year, and I think only 1 in 6 Britons would want to keep the House of Lords as it is, and I think 55% would like to see it scrapped and replaced, and only 20% 22% I think it was, want to keep it. We're against scrapping it. Sorry, the question was asked in different ways, and that's the reason for the discrepancy of those figures I just gave you. So this, and it's such a no-brainer of a policy. Okay, let's scrap this ermine-clad anachronism of unelected cronies. It speaks to that current distrust and cynicism about politics, and so much so that that Nigel Farage, for the last I think 7 or 8 years, has had scrapping the House of Lords as one of his policy platforms in his various parties, including this one, including Reform UK. So the narrative of scrapping the House of Lords and all the hereditaries going and all the power to appoint cronies and Russian oligarchs and donors of various parties and pals of people, pals of Boris Johnson and young junior staffers in Boris Johnson's government suddenly being given at the age of around about 30 odd the sinecure of being a legislator for life. This talks to people's cynicism about the political system. So the opportunity, I think, exists to counter some of the reform agenda, and also to avoid being outflanked by Farage. Labour has currently shelved the idea of reform of the House, of radical reform of the House of Lords, is doing it piecemeal instead. So Labour is in danger of being outbid on this radical agenda by Nigel Farage and Reform UK, and I think that's stupid. I think that's a missed opportunity, and one that Labour would be daft to pass up. So, what does this offer? What does this offer the Labour government? Labour government is in trouble. Okay, and it's in trouble. What this offers is a chance to project a radical agenda, an agenda in tune with the times, where elitism and lack of accountability and privilege are one of the main drivers of anger in the population at large. People want politics, plain-speaking politics, closer to them, accountability, the politicians under control, and the Brown agenda, I think, can offer that. Boldness, narrative, radicalisation. And I think we have Peter Mandelson to thank for this. The Prince of Darkness, the former Prince of Darkness, is now the Prince Andrew of the Labour Party. His history, I think, it's a chance also to make his influence on the contemporary Labour Party history as well. So let me know what you think of that. Use the comment boxes in wherever you're listening to or watching this podcast. Please feel free to subscribe for more of this. We'll be getting into the political season quite soon, with the conference season and what have you. And then in no time at all, it'll be the run-up to the Scottish Parliament elections. So if you want to keep abreast of everything that's going on with these wee chats, we're available on all the places you find your podcasts: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube with video, or on the Substack app. I would urge you to kind of download Substack app, subscribe to the Jaggy Thistle on that. Do the thumbs up or the likes or the hearts or whatever it is, wherever you find it, and spread the word. Thank you for your time. Thank you for listening. I'll see you next time.